What if I told you that, right now, some UK savers could be getting over £100 more, in fact, up to £138, from the exact same amount of money, without taking stock market risk, without gambling on crypto, and without doing anything complicated? Because fixed cash ISA rates are currently sitting at some of the highest levels we've seen in years, with August 2026 data showing average fixed ISA rates around the mid 4% range, and top deals pushing even higher. And there's one number you need to see. £138. That's the extra money a saver could potentially earn just by choosing a better rate, depending on how much they've saved and what they're moving from. But here's where this gets interesting. Because the biggest mistake you could make right now might not be choosing the wrong ISA. It might be doing absolutely nothing. If your money is sitting in an old ISA earning a mediocre rate, you could be quietly losing out every single month. And there's another problem. When rates are this competitive, they don't always stay this way for long. So before you make any move, I want you to do one thing. Check your current ISA rate. Seriously. Pause this video if you need to. Open your banking app and find the interest rate you're currently earning. Got it? Good. Now keep that number in your head. Because in this video, I'm going to break down 3 things. First, exactly how much that rate difference could be worth in real pounds and pence. Second, where the best fixed ISA rates are right now in the UK. And third, what you might be giving up if you lock your money away just to chase a higher headline rate. And if you find this useful, consider subscribing, because I break down UK savings, ISAs, and money decisions like this every week to help you keep more of what you earn. And stay until the end, because the rate that looks best on paper may not actually be the best deal for you. Let's keep this simple. No jargon. No charts. Just the one thing that actually matters. A fixed cash ISA is just a place where you put your money and it earns a fixed interest rate for a fixed period. That's it. Same money, different rate, and that's where everything changes. Because the rate you get decides how much extra money you end up with. Let's go straight to the example. You've got £10,000 in savings. One account pays 3.5%. Another pays 4.8%. That difference? It's not small. It's about £138 a year. Same £10,000. Different ISA. £138 difference. And that's before you even get into exact terms or tax rules. Now think about that for a second. You didn't earn that extra £138. You didn't do anything different. You just got a different rate. And that's the key idea here. Same money, different outcome. So if you're thinking, okay, but I already have an ISA. Good. Because that's exactly where this gets interesting. Having an ISA doesn't mean you're getting a good rate. A lot of people opened 1 year ago, left the money sitting there, and never checked it again. Not because they're careless. Just because it feels done. But banks don't reward that. And this is where the real question starts to matter. Not, do I have an ISA? But, what rate am I actually getting? Because once you know that number, you'll know whether your money is quietly working for you, or just sitting there doing less than it should. Now you might be wondering, why are people suddenly paying so much attention to fixed ISAs? And there's a very simple reason. For years, a lot of savers got used to earning almost nothing on their cash. You could have thousands of pounds sitting in a savings account, and the interest barely seemed worth talking about. But the savings market has changed. Rates have been much more competitive than they were during the years when savings rates were extremely low. And that creates an unusual opportunity. Because you can now look at your savings and ask a completely different question. Is my money earning enough? Not. Is my money safe? Not. Do I have a savings account? But, am I getting a competitive return for keeping my money here? And this matters because the difference between an average rate and a competitive rate can add up surprisingly quickly. And if you've got £20,000 or £30,000 sitting in cash, that gap becomes even more noticeable over time. But here's the key point. You're not changing the amount of money you have. You're not taking a completely different level of risk. You're simply changing where that cash is earning its interest. And here's the part one really want you to understand. A high rate doesn't mean you have to be some kind of financial expert. You don't need to understand the stock market. You don't need to predict what shares are going to do next. And you don't need to spend your evening staring at financial charts. You're simply comparing what you're getting with what else is available. But there's a catch. And this is where I don't want you to make a very common mistake. Because seeing a rate like 4.8% can make you think, that's the one. I'll take it. Stop. Not so fast. Because the highest rate isn't automatically the best deal. And in the next part, I'm going to show you something most people completely overlook when they choose a fixed ISA, and it has nothing to do with the headline rate. So you found a fixed ISA paying 4.8%. Looks great. You might even think, Why would I choose anything else? And honestly, that's exactly how people get caught out. Because when you see a big number next to an account, your brain immediately locks onto it. 4.8% feels clearly better than 4.5%. Simple. But before you move a single pound, there's a question you need to ask. What am I giving up to get that rate? Because a fixed ISA isn't just about the interest. It's about commitment. Your money is being locked away for a set period. And that changes everything. Think about real life for a second. Your car breaks down. Your boiler suddenly stops working in the middle of winter. You've got an unexpected family emergency. Or you just wake up one day and realize, I actually need that money. If your money is tied up, getting it back may not be as simple as opening your banking app and transferring it out. Depending on the account, early access may be restricted, or you may face a penalty or lose some of the interest you've earned. And in that moment, that extra percentage point doesn't feel quite as exciting anymore. This is why you can't look at savings rates in isolation. Don't just ask, what pays the most? Ask, what pays the most while still giving me the flexibility I actually need? Because there's a massive difference between having £10,000 you're confident you won't touch for a year, and having £10,000 that might be needed next month. One person can comfortably lock it away. The other could end up regretting it. And this is the part most people miss. The rate is only one piece of the puzzle. You also need to look at how long your money is fixed for. You need to understand what happens if you need access early. And you need to read the actual terms, not just the headline number in the advert. Because a rate can look brilliant on the surface, but the wrong account for your situation can quickly turn it into a problem. So before you chase that extra interest, ask yourself one simple question. Can I genuinely leave this money untouched for the full fixed period? If the answer is yes, then we can start talking about whether that higher rate actually makes sense for you. But if the answer is no, that extra interest might not be worth the trade-off. And now, let's move from theory into something much more concrete. Because I want to show you exactly what that difference in rate actually means in real pounds. On £5,000, £10,000, £20,000, and even £50,000. Okay, let's forget the percentages for a moment. Because percentages can sound impressive, but most people don't think in percentages. They think in pounds. So let's turn this into real money. Imagine you've got £5,000 sitting in a savings account. If you're earning around 3.5%, that's roughly £175 in interest over a year. But at 4.8%, that's roughly £240. That's around £65 more, just from the difference in the rate. Now let's double it. You've got £10,000. At 3.5%, that's roughly £350. At 4.8%, roughly £480. That's around £130 more. Now here's where that earlier number matters. The £138 I mentioned at the start comes from a slightly different real-world comparison, where the rate gap is a little larger than 1.3%. For example, if the difference between two accounts is 1.38% instead of 1.3%, then on £10,000, that becomes £138. So it's not a random figure. It's just a slightly different version of the same calculation, and it shows how even a small change in rates can shift the result. Now let's continue. You've got £20,000. Suddenly, that same rate difference becomes around £260. And if you've got £50,000? Now we're talking about roughly £650 of additional interest from that same gap. Pause there. Because this is where I want you to think about your own situation. How much cash do you actually have sitting in savings? £5,000? £10,000? £20,000? Maybe more? And what rate are you getting on it? Because if you've never checked, you might not even realize how much the difference could be worth. And here's the interesting part. You don't necessarily need more money to earn more interest. Sometimes, you simply need to stop accepting a poor rate. But there's something important I don't want you to misunderstand. These numbers are simple examples. The actual amount you receive will depend on the exact rate, the length of the fixed term, when the account starts, and the provider's terms. So don't watch this video and immediately think, right? I'm moving every penny today. That's not the lesson. The lesson is much simpler. Know your rate. Know what you're earning. And know what another competitive rate could potentially give you. Because once you put the difference in £2, it becomes much harder to ignore. And this brings us to one of the biggest mistakes people make. They know their savings are earning interest, so they assume everything is fine. But sometimes, fine can quietly cost you money. And that's exactly what we're going to look at next. Now here's where things get really interesting. Because you might be thinking, okay, I understand the difference in rates. But surely my bank would tell me if I could get a better deal. And this is where you need to be careful. Because your bank isn't automatically going to move you onto the most competitive rate available elsewhere. Their job is to provide the account you've already opened. And if you've been with the same provider for years, you might simply carry on without ever checking what your money is earning. Think about it. You change your mobile phone contract. You compare your energy bill. You shop around for car insurance. But when it comes to savings, a lot of people simply leave the money where it is. Why? Because moving savings feels like effort. You have to research the options. You have to read the terms. You have to make a decision. And if your money is already sitting safely in an account, your brain tells you, leave it alone. It's fine. That little word, fine, can be expensive. Because if your account is paying a lower rate than another suitable account, the difference doesn't arrive as a big bill. Nobody sends you an email saying, congratulations, you just missed out on £138. It happens quietly, month after month. And that's why this matters. The money you're missing isn't money you physically lost from your bank account. It's money you could have earned, but didn't. And once you see it that way, the decision becomes much more interesting. Now, I'm not telling you to move your money every time another account offers an extra 0.1%. That's not the point. You don't want to spend your life chasing tiny differences. But if you've got a meaningful amount of money sitting in an account, and the difference is large enough to matter, then checking your options could be worth your time. And here's the question I want you to ask yourself tonight. When was the last time you actually checked the interest rate on your savings? Not when you opened the account. Not what you think you're getting. What rate are you getting right now? Because if you don't know, you've already found the first thing you need to investigate. And next, we're going to make this even easier. I'm going to give you a simple checklist you can use before moving a single pound. So you don't get distracted by a flashy rate and end up choosing the wrong account. So, you've checked your current rate. You've seen what the difference could be worth. And now you're thinking, right? Maybe I should move my money. Before you do, stop for a moment. Because this is where I want you to slow down. You don't want to make a financial decision just because you saw a big number on a comparison table. Instead, ask yourself 5 simple questions. 1. Rate. What is the actual interest rate? Not the marketing headline. Not up to a certain percentage. What are you actually going to receive? Because the real rate is what matters, not the one designed to grab your attention. 2. Term. How long is my money going to be fixed? 1 year? 2 years? Longer? The longer the fixed period, the more important it becomes that you're comfortable leaving that money untouched. 3. Access. What happens if I need the money early? This is a big one. Don't assume you can simply withdraw it whenever you want. Check the rules before you commit. Because losing some interest, or paying penalties, can completely change whether that better rate was actually worth it. 4. Transfer. Am I moving the ISA correctly? This is where people often go wrong. If you already have money inside an ISA and want to move it to another provider, don't just withdraw it yourself and assume you can put it back. You could lose the tax-free status in the process. Instead, use the official ISA transfer process. It exists for a reason, to keep your money within its tax-free wrapper. 5. Need. Do I actually need this money during the fixed period? Be honest with yourself. Not what you hope will happen. Not what you think might happen. What is realistically likely? If you already know you'll need the money in 6 months, locking it away for a year just because the rate looks better might not make sense. But if it's money you genuinely don't need, and you're comfortable leaving it untouched, then suddenly that higher rate becomes much more relevant. And here's the biggest takeaway from this entire checklist. Don't chase the highest rate. Chase the rate that makes sense for your situation. Because the best ISA for someone else might be completely wrong for you. And now there's one final question we need to answer. Because you might be thinking, okay, but is a fixed ISA even right for me in the first place? And just as importantly, who should probably think twice before locking their money away? That's exactly what we're going to break down next. So, after everything we've covered, you might be wondering, is a fixed ISA actually right for me? And the honest answer is, it depends. Because there isn't one savings account that's perfect for everyone. Let's start with the person who may find a fixed ISA attractive. If you've got money sitting in cash, you don't need to touch it for the fixed period. You want to keep it in a tax-free ISA, and you simply want to know what rate you're getting. Then a fixed ISA could be worth considering. Especially if your current rate is significantly lower. But now let's look at the other side. If this is your emergency money, think twice. If you might need it for a house deposit, a major purchase, a car, home repairs, or simply because life has a habit of throwing unexpected expenses at us, then locking the money away could create a problem. Because the worst possible situation isn't earning a slightly lower rate. It's needing your money and discovering you can't access it in the way you expected. And there's another group that should be careful. People who see a headline like 4.8% fixed ISA and immediately want to move everything. Don't. The rate is only one part of the decision. You need to look at the term, the access rules, the transfer process, and whether the money is genuinely available for you to lock away. Because here's the mindset I want you to take away from this video. Don't make your money fit the account. Make the account fit your money. If you need flexibility, choose flexibility. If you know you don't need the cash, then a fixed rate may be more appealing. And remember, you don't have to make this decision because someone on the internet told you to. You can simply compare your current situation with what's available and decide whether the difference is meaningful enough to bother. But before you make that decision, there's one final thing I want you to understand. Because we've spent this entire video talking about getting a better rate, but there is a danger in becoming so focused on the rate that you forget about the bigger picture. And that's where people can make their most expensive mistake. So in the final part, I'm going to bring everything together, including that £138, and show you exactly how I would think through this decision before moving a single pound. So, let's bring everything together. At the start of this video, I gave you one number, £138. And now you know why that number matters. It isn't about magically finding free money. It's about understanding what a difference in interest rates can actually mean when you're talking about real savings. And just to be clear, that £138 isn't a promise. It's a simple example showing what a 1.38 percentage point difference could mean on £10,000 over 1 year, before considering the exact terms of the accounts. The actual amount you could earn will depend on the rates available, the amount you save, the fixed period, and the account terms. But the bigger lesson is much more important. Same money, different rate, different outcome. Maybe you have £5,000. Maybe £10,000. Maybe £20,000. Or perhaps you've got significantly more sitting in cash. Whatever your number is, the question is the same. Is my money earning a competitive rate for what I need? Now, here's my final warning. Don't let the headline rate make the decision for you. A rate can look fantastic and still be the wrong choice. If you need access to your money, don't ignore that. If you're uncomfortable fixing it for the full term, don't ignore that. If the transfer rules aren't clear, don't guess. And if you're only moving because you feel like you're missing out, stop. Fear of missing out is a terrible reason to make a financial decision. The goal isn't to get the biggest number on a screen. The goal is to make your savings work harder, without creating a problem for yourself later. So here's what I want you to do right now. Open your banking app. Find your savings or ISA. And look at the rate. Don't guess. Look at the actual number. Because if you're watching this video and you still don't know what rate you're getting, you've got your first action. Then compare that rate with the competitive rates available today. And ask yourself the 5 questions we covered. What rate am I getting? How long is the money fixed? What happens if I need access early? Am I transferring the ISA correctly? And do I genuinely need this money during the fixed period? If you can answer all 5 confidently, you're in a much better position to make an informed decision. And here's where I want to challenge you. Don't just watch this video and forget about it. Because that's exactly how people end up leaving their money in the same account for another year, then another year, and another. So before you close this video, check your rate. It could take less than a minute. And if you discover you're earning a rate you're perfectly happy with, great. You've confirmed it. But if you discover you're earning significantly less than what's available, at least now you know. And knowing is where making a better decision starts. Now, if this video helped you understand something about your savings that you hadn't thought about before, subscribe to the Wealth Ledger. Not because I want you to subscribe to another finance channel, but because every week we're going to break down the money decisions that can quietly cost ordinary UK savers hundreds of pounds, without making them complicated. And I want you to do something else. Comment one number below. Just your current interest rate. Don't tell me how much money you have. Just the rate. 3.2%? Comment it. 4%? Comment it. For 0.8%? I want to know. Because if enough people leave their rate in the comments, we can see just how many UK savers are sitting on rates they haven't checked for months or even years. And if this video gets enough comments, I'll make the next video showing you how to compare savings rates properly, including the small details that can make a great-looking rate much less attractive. So, before you leave, remember the number. £138. Not because £138 is guaranteed, but because it represents something much bigger. The cost of not checking. Your money is already working. The question is Is it working as hard as it reasonably could for your situation? Check your rate, know your number, and don't let your savings quietly earn less, simply because you've never stopped to look. Subscribe to the Wealth Ledger, and I'll see you in the next one.